If you would tell people though that I'm just kidding, but if you would tell people that I'm not saying, please let me sing.
Not what?
Please tell people I'm not asking to sing.
I could say you have twist marks on your arm to show.
Yeah. What is Lahai?
Lahaya, love in action. Love in action. It's at the corner of Willoughby and Salerno. It's an evangelical Christian food ministry. We're happy to be part of it.
Yeah, I know.
Sounds good.
Sounds familiar. Sounds like something I've been listening to lately. Sounds like something I've been listening to lately.
And I decided, since the theme seems too big, so I find the pieces. One twenty now. Yeah, I had the honor of playing the South African national anthem with Mandela and his wife. Jerry Schwartz conducted that, and Nelson Mandela conducted the U.S. national anthem.
Wow.
And then there were, of course, like 5 different high school and Baptist choirs, besides the entire Seattle Symphony Orchestra. At 1,800, there wasn't a paid concert, it was 1,800 invited guests. And then Nelson spoke. It was phenomenal.
When did that happen?
Gee, it must have been 10, 12 years ago when I was playing in Seattle. And you know, the entire orchestra, our entire orchestra, did this concert, including all of them, and other pieces that, you know, spoke to freedom and to individuality. And the entire orchestra was invited. Anyone who wanted to stay could stay. And I was the only musician who took the time to stay. And just to look at his face.
Did you bring your cello with you?
I played the concert.
Oh, you played there? Yeah.
Played the concert, but then there was a big talk. They were raising funds on awareness and consciousness about AIDS. They had a foundation, and you know.
That was a chance of a lifetime. Lucky you.
Yes.
Yeah, wow.
It was phenomenal. I was, you know, I was elevated for weeks.
Do you feel the same way when you hear me speak?
Why else would I come here?
And you play.
People say to me, you what? You want to be, yes. heterosexual, well-spirited, fine intention, good intentions. Everybody's one. And there are people who actually read the New York Times from start to finish. So why wouldn't I want to go there? I'm not going to take the time to do that. I would just rather read Buddhists and rabbis and presidents and poets. There's some people who, there's one senior who does great work. There's some kids who actually, since they've studied autism, they have a bit of performance. And actually, there's a new young pastor at the Episcopal Church who gets ideas with a local friend, which I just found out about last night. There's people leaving the churches to come to hear me play in Maryland State. So there were St. Mary's people and St. Joseph's people who come down and do this thing. It doesn't matter where they go for Mass as long as they have their strong
Bathroom just in case. I'm gonna go use the bathroom all the time. I'm not leaving.
When she asked me if I have time, I said, yes, we have time.
This is your man.
Hi, Judy.
Hi. Thank you.
Hey, Marge. Good to see you again. Truman, my office is open.
I just put it in the car.
Oh, you got it out?
Yep.
Okay.
When I step out, it's 11:30 again.
Well, not again. Not again.
Yeah, but I'm coming back, but they got my cake. Should I have the chat with a strange woman? I mean, no, I have a, I told you that I've been put on to the white ministerial search, and they're having the first organization meeting right after the search, just saying where the team are. So I'm going to show that, but there are 3 people in Florida, so we're doing this, and now I think I have more than 3 people from the team. There's a team of 9 and 3 of us. 2 of you are busy and are filming cards, so I don't feel so. Yeah, the cards look good. I just ran into Bill and I told him that how many cards I said, where to send my paycheck, right?
Good luck getting it.
One more minute. Okay. Yeah, what about, I don't know how many names are
Got a
coming.
really neat voice.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so
Heartless
if you're looking for
Bastard.
some different stuff to cover, even if my voice is just really
Yeah.
so it would be easier for a man to
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, the lead singer he does have tenor, but we're both baritone, so we struggle. I actually sing the higher leads, but he has a higher falsetto, so sometimes we're so it's a struggle. We have to transpose lots of stuff.
She's going to start.
Thank you, Jack. Good morning, and welcome to the Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Stuart, Florida. Today is February 20th, 2022. My name is John Moore, and I'm your worship associate today. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome people of all gender identities, races, ages, and background. It is wonderful to see all our vaccinated members in the sanctuary. We are on YouTube as well. To be put on our mailing list or to find out more about us, go to our website at tcuuc.org. Note the email link to request our online newsletter. Visitors, if there are any, if you feel comfortable, please step up to the microphone and introduce yourself, or if you prefer, you can just stand where you are and introduce yourself. Do we have any visitors this morning? The announcements for this morning: join us the first and third Tuesdays every month at Stewart Veterans Memorial Park downtown at noon for our brown bag lunch and communion and good conversation. Fridays at 11 a.m., Reverend Bob MacDonald leads a current events discussion group on Zoom. Let him know if you want to attend that, and he'll provide the link. Our book club will continue our discussion of The Midnight Library, a book novel by Matt Haig, via Zoom this coming Wednesday at 11 a.m. Let me know if you want to participate in that. Our congregation is planning a coffee house concert on Friday, March 4th from 5 to 7, featuring music from a band that shall remain nameless. We will play light rock music. TCUUC is involved in a number of giving activities. Included are our support for a family who are separated at the border but are now reunited, cooking meals at La Haya, and other activities. So if you're interested in any of these, check out the newsletter, and you can get in contact with the person who's in charge of that particular activity. A big thanks to those who helped with the service today. As always, Jackie Robbins for the music, our greeters and ushers, and our host, Karina Poloni, and our tech wizard, who helps us make all this happen, Chris McGann, Joanne Leone and Marguerite Gregory for the water and cookies on the patio. It's water this week, right? No coffee. Okay. We didn't get that changed on this trip. So there's coffee. We're going to light the chalice now. I really like this. The light of the sun does not lift the shadows that have fallen on humanity the world over. We relight our chalice flame to reignite a spirit of radical optimism, knowing that it takes us all living what matters to dispel those who would divide us. All manner of things will be well if we make them well. May our free religious communities embody the right relationship our world so needs. Many historians believe that important historical events are participated by charismatic leaders. This is sometimes called the great man theory. Forgive the sexism of that. While this idea is still popular, some historians are now inclined to see changes as evolving from larger social trends and see leaders as expediters rather than initiators. Woody Guthrie, I know it's a strange transition, but Woody Guthrie was a folk singer who lived as a hobo during the Depression, writing and entertaining fellow travelers. He listened to the ideas and music around him and distilled these ideas, stories, and melodies into cogent and impassioned song. His guitar had a message that made his feelings clear. This machine kills fascists. Woody Guthrie felt a connection with people in need, and his powerful songs nudged history toward compassion. When Guthrie heard Irving Berlin's God Bless America, go back and read the lyrics sometime, he wanted to offer a different perspective. This Land Is Your Land is based on a melody, I didn't know this, by the Carter family. His original verses from 1940 were more provocative and overtly political than the first recording he made in 1944. Later covers by Pete Seeger and Bruce Springsteen reintroduced some of these verses. Today I'm going to sing one of those alternate verses and base my arrangement on Springsteen's. He added chords, rearranged things a little bit. As I was sorry, I'm at the wrong key. As I was sorry. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was big and eerie. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was big and neat. I roamed and rambled and followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of the diamond deserts, while all around me a voice was sounding. This land was big and neat. While the sun was shining and I was strolling, and the wind was waving and the dust clouds rolling, the fog was lifting, a voice was chanting. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was big and neat. In the squares of the city, in the shadow of the steeple, by the relief office, I've seen fine people, and stood there hungry. I stood there asking, is this land made for you and me? This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. This land, this land, this land was made for you and me. Thank you kindly. Staying on with the same theme of land, we're going to now sing a hymn behind our masks. It's hymn 121, We'll Build a Land. Let us recite our affirmation, speaking the first verse and singing the second, to roll our masks. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our sacred covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
This is our time to share matters of joy, sorrow, concern, and that in the hope that as you share yours, you'll know that you are being heard and you are being supported. We ask people to make them personal as opposed to announcements and brief. So please come and make yours at the mic, or if you need to or want to from where you're seated. Anyone? Oh, I forgot to say, and please move a stone after you say.
John Moore. Wow, thank you. And I have two joys. The second is the book club that John is our host, keeps us on track. We just finished a book by our member, Linda Shuey, and it was just wonderful. It's about her years of teaching special ed. And if someone would like this book to borrow it, I have it.
And the first one.
Well, the first joy is John. Oh, okay. Okay.
This group doesn't let you get away with anything.
personal and not the announcement. So I have a personal announcement. It'll be very brief. It's a joy to share that our pledge drive is kicking off. And in keeping with the song that John Moore sang, I just want to paraphrase the key line out of there. This church is your church. Keep that in mind, and we'll welcome your pledge. More than one.
All right. I'm Judy Majoris, and for me, music lifts my spirits. I don't know how I could live without music. Thank you, John, for it this morning. And I would like to mention that this week we filled a table with unions to go see Jackie in her chamber orchestra trio at the Episcopal Church, and it was just delightful. It was just beautiful, and I feel like we are so fortunate to have her talent, her smile, her sense of humor in the church. I often tell her.
A very personal kind of joy. A young lady who sang in our church 4 years ago. However, girl, she got information that she's going to be graduating from my alma mater, Indiana University. And she has been part of the music program. Now she's part of the international studies program. And she was listed both on the executive dean's list and as a person who would be on the stage during the graduation ceremonies. So quite an accomplishment for that young lady.
What alma mater was that from?
Indian.
Anyone else?
I'm Hafford, and I think I'm both sad and also celebrating the life that passed this week. My stepson's mom, my husband's first wife, who was a good person and considered a friend, passed away from Alzheimer's long-standing Thursday. And my son, my stepson, sat vigil with her in nursing home and hospice care for 4 straight days and nights. He's had more than his share of death in the last 2 years. His stepfather was murdered, son, and now his mom. So we want to lift up Tim Burke, his amazing name, and all of his choices. I should mention that he was a lifelong Mormon and recently was seen at several youth
Anyone else? Well, we always want to move a stone for those that we haven't said out loud, but we have our worries, concerns for. The meditation is a reading from the back of the hymnal by Mary Oliver entitled Wild Geese. I've read it before. I'll read it again, but I'll read it now. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes. over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. Mary Oliver. And now moments of silence. The hymn is Spirit of Life, 123. We hum a verse, we sing a verse, all in Mass, of course. And now we keep going here because of the generosity of so many who have given us here so much. And this holiday, President's Day, also reminds us of how much we have been given. So we hope in that spirit you'll greet the offering plate as it comes your way. Thank you to the ushers, I forgot to ask. I'm sure this has been given with thanks, and you can be sure it is received with thanks. I was going to say that. I'm always excited about new things happening here. I get excited about old things happening here too. But the new things I just want to underline, I'm really looking forward to that stubborn group that's coming here on the 4th from 5 to 7. I'm raising it again because I discovered that we have friends who will gladly come with us for that evening. I know people don't like to drive after dark, and I know 7 is dark, but it's not late, and if people don't want to drive, I hope they'll find someone who they can carpool with. But I've told our friends that they have to bring their own, whatever they're going to consume, no hands but theirs will touch it, and they'll sit with a little tea table that we'll provide as we will. So for heaven's sake, you have friends too. If I have friends, you must have friends. Bring them, bring them. It should be quite an evening, and we hope that we will have a good turnout for this group. Also, I want to mention I'm excited about trying to start a group that's interested in the world. Hey, we're UUs. Who's not interested in the world? But anyhow, Marguerite suggested that people who come from other parts of the planet, and people who have visited other parts, and people who have lived abroad, have things to share and to learn from each other. So next Sunday after the service, all interested in such a group will meet and brainstorm how and what and when, a group in which we learn from each other. It should be an interesting group. I would say let's call it UU World, but I think that name has been taken. But we'll find a name. We'll find an interest, I know. The sermon is a tainted and inspiring presidents. Patriotism, love of country, is a good thing. Early in my life, a good thing became and stayed a troubling thing. I chose a small college in West Virginia because I knew I could work my way through as a minister to little churches in the countryside, farm country. Those little churches could only afford something like this 19-year-old. I got a prime spot from my second year to graduation, so I was there for 3 years. I walked to many farm homes to meet and greet. My first home visit was to a house about a city block distance from the little house they provided the minister, a parsonage. I got to their property and there was a big cow lying at the porch steps, across the steps. I turned around and went home. And I called them and told them why. It got around that the new minister was afraid of cows. I unfortunately added that I didn't know if it was a cow or a bull. That really got around. One of my first funerals when I was 20 was for a young man about the same age. Little Jimmy, as he was known in that community. Little Jimmy went off to Vietnam and came home in a casket about a month later. It was something like typhoid, not a bullet. Because I was a bit troubled by the seeming unfairness that I went off to college from the projects of downtown Troy, New York, West Virginia by bus seemed about as far as Southeast Asia. I got to go off to college while others I knew had to go off to war and die. I dealt with what was no doubt guilt about that by reading about the background of the war. A pamphlet by a scholar from an institute headed by Robert Hutchins. Can't remember the scholar, but I remember Hutchins because he later became the president of the University of Chicago and the Ford Foundation. The scholar wrote about the domino theory in U.S. foreign policy in the 50s. It was like a religious faith in the State Department. If we let one little country in Southeast Asia fall to communism, all of Asia, except Russia, would belong to Mao Zedong. I also read that Ho Chi Minh was a nationalist more than he was a communist, like Marshal Tito of Yugoslavia, who waged a successful guerrilla war against the Nazis in World War II. Now this is an aside to an aside, and I'll try to be brief. On a bus tour of Vietnam in 2013, the guide calls out from the front, "Can anybody name the 10 greatest generals of all time according to the British Museum and listed there?" The tourists gamely call out, "George Washington." No, there might be a little bias in not putting Washington on the list at the British Museum. Someone else calls out MacArthur. No, I think maybe Robert E. Lee was on the list. The guy did this because Vietnam was proud of 2 names on the list. One we never heard of, but was defeated and turned back the Mongol hordes centuries earlier. And General Giap, who defeated the French at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, and the Americans 20 years later. Giap died about 10 years ago at 102. Now, you didn't come for a history lesson, and you're really not getting one, though it may sound like one. But President's Day brings up patriotism, both my love of our country and the questions that have never gone away. Do people who love the country and its policies unquestioningly, often captured in the phrase, "my country first," right or wrong, do they love their country more than those who are troubled enough to question and to take to the street and even move across the northern border if necessary? Patriotism, like religion, changes when you have to think about and learn about what we have done and why. Can we live in a country where the citizens get to pick which wars are just and worth their sons and daughters' lives? Something about that doesn't feel right. But because of respect for conscience, we live in such a country, fortunately. But that debate, I have found, never goes well, nor ends well. You may have to let it rest, but it doesn't let me rest. Several denominations in the 80s began to require ministers to get CE credits, continuing education, every year. The hope was, with some continuing education, we couldn't remain too antiquated. I have known a lot of clergy, and I discovered where there's a will, there's a way. So churches gave 2 weeks and a small budget for back to school. and you could shop for what updating you wanted. I got the idea to look for seminaries in foreign countries, preferably English speaking, and go sit in classes for 2 weeks. I found seminaries in England would welcome such visitors and not charge much. I thought by going to England there wouldn't be a language problem. But there was a little one now and then. Anyway, students I sat next to asked, why would anyone come here who didn't have to? Well, I sort of had to, but definitely wanted to. My first venture was a Methodist seminary in Bristol, England. When people in my Long Island church learned I was going there, they gave me the names of friends to look up. I would get a good meal, they promised. I had quite an evening. The retired man had taken up art, painting, as a retirement hobby and passion, and wanted to show me his home studio and his works. As we went in, his dear wife chimed from the kitchen, "Remember his career, dear, not the nudes." I remember the couple now for the table conversation. They brought up the way the American press goes after American politicians. They were referring to the Kennedy brothers, particularly John and Ted. They said, "We Brits expect politicians to be driven and overdriven, and not just in the department of their political goals and achievements. But those are the only ones, the only part of their lives we care about, what their work will do for us. Their personal relationships are not our business." I've since learned about British tabloids, but I certainly agreed that the American press can pick on what is not our business and not give a mention about what is our business. Remember Gary Hart's challenge to the press, "Catch me if you can"? And I think it was Al Gore's sigh, and even George Bush 1 looking at his watch during a debate. And weren't peanut farmer and community organizer used dismissively? All what we learned in college logic, ad hominem. Talk about the man, not his ideas or policies. Fix on flaws or just perceived shortcomings of the candidate, not what he, she might do for or do to the country. So we've heard of late, we aren't electing a saint. What about a devil? Not naming, just saying, some flaws matter. Commitment to the Constitution is a pretty big vital. So the greatest presidents we have had were human and of their time. Several of the early presidents were men of the Enlightenment. John Adams became a Unitarian late in life. Adams and Jefferson gave up on the divinity of Christ, but venerated his moral teachings. Jefferson translated and reduced the New Testament to those moral teachings of Jesus. Enid Johnson treasured the Jefferson Bible, the third president's translation, as if he had handed it to her himself. The early presidents have been scrutinized for their position on slavery and their treatment of slaves. Their part in this crime, slavery, at our founding, doesn't detract from what they tried to create. Their greatness in crafting a nation under law and protection from tyranny, even mob rule. Almost daily, we are served up evidence of that crime, slavery and racism. Still with us, like police pulling apart two teens fighting in a mall, one black, one white, and one of the teens gets seated on a couch and the other gets cuffed. No surprise. So those founding fathers were of their time and we are of ours. And our ability to deal with the aftermath of slavery will be a good part of our legacy, for good or ill. I guess it's progress that police treatment of the teens is observed, not to condemn the teens or the police, but to remind us equal treatment under the law. We aren't there yet. These founding fathers and mothers inspire us to finish what they started. We have been given to see that there are no 3/5 people, the way slaves were counted, for census and representation. And power and the vote were not to reside only with propertied white men. The country and law and right would fall upon all and not be based on one tiny, decisive property, skin color. The presidents we call great seem to have been made for their time. Washington and Lincoln, whose birthdays brought this holiday to this month, seem made for and by history. The one I most revere is FDR. America in the 1900s had a strong strain of isolationism. Stay out of the world affairs and keep the world out of ours. Roosevelt knew what would happen if Britain fell. So he pushed through the Lend-Lease program to get arms to Britain. He hid his polio and made a political marriage to a great woman work. They were two great internationalists when we needed them. He laid the groundwork for the US and Europe and Japan building a future. And he had the vision not to punish the enemies, but rather help them rebuild. He had learned the lesson of World War I. Now, after reading Jonathan Alter's The Defining Moment, FDR's 100 Days and the Triumph of Hope, it struck me he wasn't a Rhodes Scholar, but he had great instincts. He knew how to turn tragedies into openings, and he was what the world needed. And of course, he was vilified for generations for the work programs that brought us out of the Great Depression. I also revere his Brit partner, Churchill. I love that scene in The Darkest Hour when Churchill takes the subway to work and sits there brooding while all the other passengers try not to watch him but know who he is. And he gets up and says something like, "What should I do?" And they encourage him with, "We'll fight to the death if we have to." Another memorable moment in that movie, he has a very sheepish note taker with him all the time, practically. And he's in the shower and she's just outside taking notes should he say something profound. And he does say, "I'm coming out now with all my humanity showing." And she takes off. She takes off. So another inspiring leader in his moment, and possibly tainted or just human, but a human who rose to the call. Harry Truman stands tall for his internationalism, overseeing the Marshall Plan to help Europe rebuild. On another bus tour of Eastern Europe, we watched a film of the Berlin airlift, 48 to 49. Planes landing and taking off every 30 seconds with supplies to keep the city from succumbing to the Soviet stranglehold. Yesterday's Times, I think, carried the obituary of Gale Halverson, 101. He was known as the Candy Bomber for his Berlin airlift dropping of candy. Presidents get to lead in proud moments, and we hope another one, a moment of US and Europe working together, will avert an unnecessary war. For discussion of presidents in our lifetime, it's often a hurdle to get past the halo or the horns to evaluate positively what they have done for the country and negatively what they have done to the country. History will settle it, but this is our history, and sometimes we just can't wait. Generals have been thanked for their service by being crowned. Scions, offshoots of prominent families just seemed entitled. The peanut farmer has had the most exemplary post-presidency. Well, he didn't get a second term. He made a 40-year retirement, 1981 to now, 40 years of building homes and surveilling elections around the world. For a long time, I thought his finest moment was the pre-presidency April 1976 interview in Playboy. How would I know that? I read it for the interviews, remembering my career. In that interview, he, an evangelical Southern Baptist running for the office, admitted to having felt lust in his heart. Laughable now, that should be a bombshell, or even breaking news, or news at all. Carter's life of service, however you graded those 4 years, will stand as a history lesson that can't be faulted for intention or accomplishment. It is, of course, for us, the citizenry, to judge who has the goods in him or her, and who will gather capable people for the team they have to field. We have been surprised by relative unknowns. What shouldn't surprise us is their humanity, and we always hope their gifts will serve them and all of us. Now, the closing hymn is rather internationalist in flavor. 159, This Is My Song. as John extinguishes our chalice, my closing words are from George Washington's farewell address, 1796. In contemplating the causes which may disturb our union, it occurs as matter of serious concern that any ground should have been furnished for characterizing parties by geographical discriminations, northern and southern, Atlantic and western, whence designing men may endeavor to excite a belief that there is a real difference of local interests and views. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence within particular districts is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. You cannot shield yourselves too much against the jealousies and heartburnings which spring from these misrepresentations. They tend to render alien to each other those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection. George Washington.